Today, everyone, things are rather scuffed. They really are rather scuffed, and honestly, in a way that does feel anti-consumer. It does feel like there are things that people really should have known about the GTA Trilogy Definitive Edition. There's just things that people should have known before it went live. That, weren't exactly forthcoming. There have been issues. So let's talk about what's been happening here. The GTA, the Trilogy, the Definitive Edition, released this week, and it has not been going well. I'm sure you've seen it being clowned on. So essentially, there have just been so many problems in and around the launch. Right, there's some gameplay issues that make the whole thing feel like a rush job. It costs $60, and on top of all of this being scuffed, they have removed the old, reliable, and moddable versions from online sale in order to facilitate this, meaning that this Definitive Edition to many people is actually feeling like a downgrade, which is absolutely not what we want to have happen for such a beloved set of games that, as kids, we all played these, right?
Yeah, as we'll get into, this is basically them completely going, oh, yeah, how can we just farm these out for money again? Yep. Because obviously they were all for sale, but then they're like, nah, we'll resell them, put a fresh coat of paint on it. Who cares what the paint is? And we'll just make the money in this, the holiday season where video games are big, because we're still working on GTA 6, basically.
Yeah, that is totally how it feels like with this story. Now, before we jump in, mega quick lightning round self-promo. The Pale Beyond, in case you're not aware, it is our game from our studio. You can wishlist it, link down below, and check out the reveal video we did in this channel, just before this one. Okay, with that said, let's get into the news. Right then, the issues began on PlayStation, everyone. The game was supposed to launch at 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on the 11th of November. However, the people who pre-ordered the game, the digital edition that is, were actually able to access it from around midnight in their local time. That meant that some people were able to play the game a full 24 hours earlier than intended, which is not really a humongous deal, but Rockstar did end up acting, and that meant they temporarily removed the game from sale. So that was very odd. And then a similar issue popped up on the PC platform on launch day. Rockstar tweeted a few hours after launch that the Rockstar launcher was down for maintenance, and it's actually still down as of the time of this doc being put together this very day. And that means that the PC players who bought the game with money still aren't really able to play it, and the game also was pulled from sale on Rockstar's online store.
Yep.
This is so strange. That a company would have this wacky business go on launch day? Recently in the channel, we've been talking about how, they're putting de novo on their games to protect launch day. And this happens on launch day.
Yeah, it shows how serious they're taking it if they're pulling it from sale and also taking the whole Rockstar launcher down for maintenance.
Yeah.
But we'll explain very shortly why we think that is.
So this is a bit of a mess. Now, as for why this happened, well, data miners recently confirmed that the PC version of the Trilogy still contains all of the music that is no longer licensed. So it's just the script that disables that music. And it also includes uncompiled code and a lot of developer comments. Now, the way that will work, you're writing your lines of code, you'll put in 2 slashes, you'll write your little comments, or whatever the syntax is. You'll write your comments. Your fellow devs know what you've been doing. But often, developers will have a little bit of fun with their comments because you got to stay sane when you're working. Some of that maybe is not going to be fit for public consumption.
Yep.
So that might be why the launcher is down, because technically they did ship a whole bunch of music that they do not have the license for. It was a script that disabled it, but they still technically did ship it. So that is quite rough. Here's a fun comment. This shit doesn't work the way they wrote it below, so we'll just show the text and place the blip at the beginning of the mission. So we just have... Yes, little bit of fun there. Now, the funny thing is the Xbox release actually seems to be fine.
Yeah.
Although...
for now.
Yeah. As we have, although maybe give it a couple of days until it turns out the Game Pass release of San Andreas can brick your console or something crazy. Now, the Game Pass release of San Andreas is out there, and that does mean that a lot of people have got access to this game, and that is where a lot of critique has in fact came from.
Absolutely.
So before we go into the actual state of the game as shipped, this launch situation is... I mean, really rough and must suck for Rockstar. But speaking of sucking for not only Rockstar, but also the fans, the community, the players, we need to get into this. So, just seems to be scuffed. I mean, you don't want to have GTA Definitive Edition Cyberpunk, Cyberpunk Edition appearing. So, per CJ, he's in the floor. Now CJ is through the floor and he's falling. But yeah, this is just a fun video we found, just kind of compiling general levels of scuffed that are on display. I mean, there's CJ's arm. What's going on with his arm? Now, some bugs and things we can expect, but generally people are just finding that it is a buggy experience. And there's also a lot of visual criticism and just, I mean, look, what is... There's just so much bizarre behavior going on here, to the point where for a lot of people, it just ends up feeling unfinished. There's some bits where it looks great, other areas where it's basically too dark to really see. So it's the sort of thing where it feels like they've kind of done their across-the-board changes, but just a lot of the minutiae aren't exactly perfect, and it's that minutiae that comes together to really make it great, an excellent player experience.
Yeah, that's one of the things that they talked about in an interview before this went live. And obviously, you know, it's a bit brave to talk about stuff like that because it might go a little bit wrong, as we've seen. But they were basically saying that they used to just have baked lighting everywhere, but now they're using dynamic lighting, which means they have to check everything actually works. Because if an alleyway is too dark because it's nighttime or something like that, they need to make sure they can manually change it by putting dynamic source of light in.
Yeah.
Whereas before they can't just rely on the old baked lighting that was done. So they basically had to relight a lot of the game. And I think based on what I've seen on Twitter and stuff, there's a lot of people saying, to play this game, I've had to crank my TV's contrast and brightness to maximum. This is brutal. But it's just oversight. It's just the same themes we'll find throughout all the issues. It's just, it wasn't given enough time in the oven. And that's basically what exactly we're saying here.
Yeah, it really seems like that. Then there's the upgraded textures. Sometimes they look on par with other open world games, but there are texture misalignment issues. There are things that just display incorrectly and some inconsistencies. So if you have textures that look really up to date and modern and then textures that don't, that level of inconsistency, I mean, that is what makes something not really feel like a cohesive product to people. Generally, it's like you would actually almost prefer to have slightly worse textures across the board, but for them to be evenly applied and consistent.
Yeah, one of the ways I think I could best explain the texture misalignment that I've seen is obviously there's stuff like, you know, just big stretch textures over mountains and things, but the worst I think is on the roads, where there are roads where, you know how a road is lined with markings. There are ones that literally look like you just let a school full of like primary school children out with a big pack of yellow crayons and they just went mad all over the road, and that's what it looks like. Yeah. Because of the misalignment.
That's pretty rough. Then also some cheats aren't there. Now cheats, they're a massive part of just having fun in GTA, some of the madness that could happen. So they had to remove some cheats for technical reasons, which, you know, doesn't really mesh well with Definitive Edition. I mean, I can understand it happening, but it's not a nice thing. Kotaku's write-up saying that, basically none of these issues are a deal breaker, but overall they're feeling it's not that definitive. $60 premium release calling itself Definitive Edition of one of the most influential, popular, and beloved gaming trilogies of all time. And I think we can pretty much all agree that it doesn't really live up to that. I mean, this is the one that I saw. What's going on here? Like, look at how the rain and the water operate together. Like, this is insane. What is... His eyes do hurt. Yeah. I can see why.
In My Eyes Hurt Part 2, at the start, when he leaps off, you can see how awfully scuffed it is.
Yeah.
Because of the angle he's coming down at.
Oh, no. And it's like, even you can see the repeating patterns in the rain. That is some of the worst implemented rain I've seen. Yeah,
like, in terms of, okay, you have to think about, or what I like to do is I like to think about how developers are looking at this. Because there's no way someone shipped that and is seeing that tweet and going, I thought that looked fine. What's going on? They're clearly going to be looking at this and going, for fuck's sake. Of all the things I didn't have time to fix, I should have maybe prioritized fixing that instead. because it just
It's
everything
raining
about.
inside the car.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, yeah. No roofs in San Andreas, but a lot of those things are just straight up. Hey, they clearly didn't have time to fix this.
Yes.
They didn't clearly have the time to go. Well, okay, we'll do this. This is this is the equivalent of a known shippable bug. It's just I definitely wouldn't call that shippable. I'd be ashamed to have my name on that. But that's what happens in the realities of business, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, here's you mentioned the crayons. I've got a screenshot up here of the crayons. It is just rough. Now, this apparently is all 2 years of development work, and it's just that thing. Lots of it looks solid, lots of it also doesn't, and you can't really shake the feeling that this should have maybe came out like Q2 next year.
Yeah.
But that this really is here, for Christmas. That it's here to hit that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's lots of just lots of feel issues. I mean, look at this. We got a 9 on top of the 7. What's going on?
I'd love to know how that happened.
Here's the typos. So here's the original, and then the texture upscaling. I mean, these are all misspelt. They haven't translated. What's going on?
Yep.
I mean, okay. So for the existing assets, Rockstar and Grove Street used an AI program to upscale the textures before going in by hand and tweaking them to make sure they look right. They hate signage, and it would screw it up pretty fierce. And we still have some issues there. And it's like one of those isn't the biggest deal breaker, but I mean, it's pretty bad when it does just like the way that it looks doesn't really mesh with like the rest of the textures and stuff from the remaster. It's that weird visual inconsistency.
Yeah.
So it is unfortunate.
Yeah, everything about it just seems this idea of they used an AI program to scale it up. It's like they went the lazy route. And obviously I'm all for using automation correctly, but if you don't have time to tweak all their textures by hand, don't do it. If you don't have the time, just simply don't.
Yeah, or it could have just been the AI was probably the right move. It's just it maybe a little bit more was needed. To do some balance here, like you can get screenshots of this game looks good. I mean, this looks good.
Yep.
Here, these shots in Vice City, like they look great. That looks pretty much like what you would think a remaster would look like. So perhaps San Andreas is just the more messed up looking one.
Yeah.
It could be that. Fundamentally, you can hop in, and assuming you don't run into a lot of the issues, you can have a more modern looking and feeling original 3D GTA Trilogy experience.
Yep.
So there is that benefit there. But also they did ship with a lot of issues, it seems.
Yeah. So it's the idea of like a lot of it seems to be San Andreas, because that's when people are playing the most. That's where most issues. I have seen issues in Vice City, but it seems like Vice City's had a lot more cleanup time, and the same problems haven't went quite as wrong. But then, I guess it boils down to the thought of, well, how did this happen? And I just was sort of thinking there, why did they release this for holiday? Why was it not ready in time for that? And then you remember, you know what they would have loved to release for this holiday season? Grand Theft Auto 5, whatever they're calling it, Enhanced Edition for PS5 and Xbox Series X and S and whatever else. But that was announced for March 2022. And I don't think they ever wanted to release that in March 2022. I feel like this is 100% fired way out the gate, way, way, way too early. Just because they wanted something for holiday, but they couldn't put what they wanted instead. And obviously, we're not going to hear this until there's, obviously, hopefully Jason Schreier has his contacts in Rockstar. Maybe you'll have someone at Grove Street Games that'll be able to talk to him and say, here's why this went this way. But it very much seems like this is literally just, is it done? No. Is it vaguely shippable? Sort of. All right. Yeah. Well, it has to go.
And then there's the consumer angle of this.
Yeah.
So why did we not know more? And here's from IGN. How impactful are any of these changes to the 3 experiences? Well, we don't really know yet, since we only got our hands on the collection of games when you did, after it went live on the PSN store earlier today.
That's everything you need to know.
Yep. Feels a little bit cyberpunky. Not literally the same, but consumers should have known.
Yep.
Because looks good in the trailers, maybe not as good when you actually have the full experience, which is a great shame because these are, I mean, they might play a little bit old because they are older games, but they are great games. So much to love about them. It is sad to see it this way. I guess we can only hope that Rockstar actually stick to this, that these things get, polished up. There's a bit of me that's like, it would be great if we got the mod support and all those things back, but I mean, this is a different engine. I doubt it. So that's the situation. It seems like some more time is needed, and it's perhaps a little bit unfair on the developers at, is it Grove? It's perhaps a little bit unfair that they maybe didn't get all the time they needed to really have this at the stage. I'm sure they would have wanted it to be at for launch.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, any developer, I can't imagine, especially with a name like Grove Street Games, they weren't, and San Andreas is the one that's scuffed. They're not going to be the ones going, yeah, fuck it, we'll make loads of money off this. They'll make their wage if they're lucky. Whereas it's the head honchos at Rockstar and it's Take-Two that are to blame for this. And that's always the case. It's another reminder that we shouldn't trust publishers. We shouldn't trust them whatsoever. And it's like,
some of them anyway.
Yeah, I mean, never pre-order a game unless you're 100% sure. And if they're hiding reviews, then that's the biggest red flag I think there possibly could be.
Yeah, pretty much. So that's that. Let's hope this gets better. Of course, let us know what your experiences have been like with this. Hopefully it gets fixed. People are shining a light in this, and the best way that this can go is that it gets fixed up and that everybody gets better games. So that is it for us. Have a great day. Check out our game, The Pale Beyond, on Steam today and wishlist if you want to support us. And I'll see you next time.